I found a letter Washington never wanted the world to see. It wasn't about muskets, cannons, or bloodied battlefields. It was about starving an empire without firing one shot. A hidden network of spies, forged money, and broken supply lines. This was the war Britain never saw coming, until too late. You've heard about the battles. You've never heard about the machine behind them. Somewhere between forged banknotes, phantom armies, and letters written in invisible ink, George Washington waged a war that history books forgot to mention. A war designed not to defeat Britain's soldiers, but to collapse the empire's confidence from within. If you want to see how this hidden system actually worked, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments. What do you think broke Britain first? Money, morale, or misinformation? Picture New York, 1776. Not the battlefield you remember, but a city crawling with men who smiled at redcoats by day and copied their orders by candlelight. I stand in that shadow world now, watching Washington's real weapon take shape. Not gunpowder, but information moving faster than any British general could react to. He called it the Culper Ring, a network so quiet that even most of his own officers never knew the names hidden inside it. A tavern keeper, a merchant's wife, a farmer who counted ships in the harbor like a man counting sheep. Each one feeding secrets back through a chain designed to survive capture. Here's what textbooks skip entirely. Washington lost more battles than he won, yet he never lost the one war that mattered most, the war for information. Every troop movement leaked, every fleet position mapped, every British commander's confidence quietly eroded by an enemy who somehow always seemed to know what came next. I traced the ink myself, literal invisible ink, a chemical compound so advanced for its time that British codebreakers spent years failing to crack it. This wasn't luck, this was architecture. This, a designed system built to make an empire doubt its own eyes, its own maps, its own certainty of victory. And the deeper I go, the more this stops looking like a rebellion of farmers with muskets and starts looking like the first modern intelligence war in human history. But information alone doesn't collapse an empire. Something else was already moving beneath Britain's feet, something far more dangerous than spies, and it lived inside their own economy. I hold in my hand, figuratively, a piece of paper that did more damage to Britain than any cannon Washington ever fired. A counterfeit banknote, printed not by criminals, but by strategy. Britain's economy ran on paper currency backed by trust. And trust, I discover, was exactly what this hidden war targeted first. British printing presses in occupied cities churned out fake continental currency by the millions, designed to collapse American finances from the inside out. But here's the twist rarely mentioned. Washington's circle quietly turned that same weapon back on its creators, flooding British-controlled markets with confusion about which currency could even be trusted. Merchants stopped knowing what their money was worth. Soldiers questioned their pay. Loyalists who once felt secure suddenly felt the ground shifting beneath their own loyalty. I walk through what economic historians call a slow bleed. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but devastating in a way no battlefield death toll could capture. Supply contracts fell apart. Shipments meant for British troops vanished into black markets that thrived precisely because no one trusted official channels anymore. This is the part of the story most documentaries skip entirely because it doesn't photograph well. There's no charge, no flag, no dramatic sword raised toward the sky. Yet I find myself convinced this was the true battlefield. Ledgers, forged bills, and broken contracts doing what muskets alone never could, making the empire doubt its own machinery. And just as Britain scrambled to stabilize its currency and its confidence, something even more unsettling was unfolding across the Atlantic. Inside rooms where diplomats smiled while quietly working against their own government. I step into a Parisian drawing room in 1777 where wine glasses clink and laughter fills the air. And somewhere beneath that laughter, an empire is being quietly dismantled by men wearing British loyalty like a costume. Benjamin Franklin sits here, not as a soldier, but as something far more dangerous. A man fluent in the language of flattery, patience, and calculated silence. I watch him work rooms full of French aristocrats, never begging for help, always letting the promise of humiliating Britain do the persuading for him. Here's what rarely makes it into textbooks. France didn't join this war out of love for American liberty. It joined because Franklin engineered a narrative Britain never saw coming. He leaked selective victories, exaggerated momentum, and quietly reminded French ministers of old grudges from wars Britain had once won at France's expense. Meanwhile, British diplomats grew arrogant, assuming continental Europe would never risk backing a rebellion doomed to fail. A miscalculation that would cost them everything. I trace secret meetings hidden inside merchant ships, disguised as trade negotiations, where French gunpowder and money moved toward American shores long before any formal alliance existed. This wasn't charity. This was psychological warfare disguised as diplomacy. An empire's rivals turned into unwitting weapons through patience, timing, and carefully placed information. By the time Britain realized France had committed fully, it wasn't just facing rebellious colonists anymore. It was facing a coordinated, multinational effort built entirely on manipulated perception. But alliances and forged currency alone don't win wars. And what I uncover next reveals the most ruthless tactic of all. How Washington turned Britain's own soldiers into instruments of their empire's undoing. I walk through a winter camp where the real weapon isn't a rifle at all. It's a pamphlet, printed cheaply, distributed quietly, designed to plant doubt inside the minds of men wearing red coats. Washington's circle understood something Britain never fully grasped. An army isn't just muskets and formations, it's morale. And morale can be dismantled with words alone. I find records of desertion campaigns, offers of land, freedom, and new identities extended to British soldiers, particularly the thousands of Hessian mercenaries fighting a war that was never truly theirs. These weren't random defections. They were engineered, using printed leaflets smuggled into enemy camps promising a future far more appealing than dying for a king they'd never met. Here's the detail most documentaries leave out. Entire units of Hessian soldiers eventually settled permanently in America, having been persuaded not through battle, but through carefully crafted psychological pressure. I trace how captured soldiers were treated with unusual generosity, a calculated kindness meant to spread rumors back through enemy lines about how differently this war could end for them. British commanders grew paranoid, uncertain which of their own men still held loyalty, and that uncertainty alone slowed decisions, delayed movements, and created hesitation exactly when speed mattered most. This is warfare without visible casualties, yet it drained British strength more effectively than any single battle. An invisible erosion happening inside barracks, tents, and quiet nighttime conversations. I stand at the edge of what historians rarely frame as a weapon. Empathy itself, deployed strategically, turning captured enemies into walking advertisements for defection. But even this wasn't the final blow. Because the last piece of this hidden war wasn't fought with paper, currency, or persuasion at all. It was fought with silence, timing, and one devastating trap at Yorktown. I arrive at Yorktown in 1781, but not at the battle itself. I arrive at the deception that made the battle possible. A lie so convincing that Britain moved its entire strategy around a fiction. Washington's forces staged false letters, fake troop movements, and deliberately leaked plans suggesting an attack on New York, a target so obvious that British command never questioned it. I watched General Clinton hold his forces in place, utterly convinced New York remained the true objective, while Washington's real army quietly marched hundreds of miles in the opposite direction. This wasn't improvisation. This was the culmination of years spent mastering deception. The same instincts honed through spies, forged currency, and psychological pressure now aimed at one final decisive strike. French naval forces, coordinated through those same Parisian relationships Franklin cultivated years earlier, moved to seal off Chesapeake Bay, cutting Cornwallis's army off from any hope of rescue by sea. I trace how completely isolated Cornwallis became, trapped between an approaching army he underestimated and an ocean escape route that no longer existed, thanks to timing built on years of manipulation. Here's what rarely gets emphasized. Yorktown wasn't won through overwhelming force. It was won because Britain had already lost the information war, the financial war, and the psychological war months earlier. When Cornwallis finally surrendered, British soldiers reportedly marched out with their band playing a tune mocking their own collapse. A fittingly ironic end to a war lost through systems, not just soldiers. I stand back from this moment realizing the battlefield surrender was merely the visible ending of an invisible war that had been unfolding for years across ledgers, letters, and quiet conversations in foreign capitals. Britain didn't just lose an army at Yorktown. It lost the illusion of control, the confidence of an empire that never realized it had been outmaneuvered long before the first shot at that final siege was ever fired. What toppled the British Empire in America wasn't cannon fire alone. It was an invisible architecture of spies, forged currency, manipulated diplomacy, and psychological warfare, built patiently over years while the world watched only the battles. Washington understood something rarely taught in classrooms. Empires don't collapse from single blows. They erode from 1,000 quiet fractures in trust, money, morale, and perception, until the final battlefield defeat becomes inevitable rather than surprising. The war Britain lost wasn't the one fought in the open. It was the hidden one. And understanding that difference changes everything we thought we knew about how empires truly fall.